Hello, Donna here. Welcome to my channel. Now today we're going to do something. I'm going to shape a heart using this scrap clay, and then I'm going to cut slices off of one of these square canes, and I'm going to show you how I piece together over an irregular form and how I try to make the patterns match up. Now, first of all, you're going to need a square cane, and this cane is slightly different from one side to another, which makes it just a little bit more difficult. And by that I mean this side that I'm showing you, the pattern is larger than on this side. I don't think it's going to be a huge problem, but it is kind of simpler if you have a pattern that is really even and uniform on both sides or throughout. Now, of course, I'm using Kato poly clay, so my clay is a little bit stiff, which is what makes it really good for cane work. The details are easier to maintain. There's less squish and distortion because the clay has a stiffer body. Now, this is scrap clay, also Kato poly clay. Now, let's talk a little bit as I'm rolling this up, because I'm going to just roll up from one edge to the other. In terms of the feel of the clay, the base clay that I'm going to form the heart out of, well, you want this clay not to be softer than this clay. All right, it's got to be just a tad bit firmer or the same firmness, but it should not be softer. And I'll give you an example. This is the most extreme circumstance that you don't want. Now, if you're American, you know what a s'more is. If you're not, let me describe it. It's two graham crackers, and between the graham crackers, you put a piece of chocolate and toasted marshmallow. So the marshmallow is very soft, and the chocolate's okay. You know, it never completely melts. Anyway, when you make this particular thing called a s'more, as in I want s'more, what will happen is you squeeze the two graham crackers and the center splooshes out. The marshmallow just out the center. That is an extreme case of an extremely soft core with firmer pieces on the outside. In other words, this is the graham cracker, this is the marshmallow. All right, so that's why you want the core to be the same firmness, or maybe just even slightly firmer than the clay in the canes. Okay, so let's get started. So I have just rolled into a cylinder, and now I'm going to push the ends in, and I'm going to roll this into a ball. All right. And I take the ends, and I'm just rounding them like so, because it's just easier to soften this edge first by manipulating and pushing the clay in just like that, and then push it. All right. Okay, so now it actually looks like a brown marshmallow, but it's not. It's my scrap clay. Okay, let's roll it into a ball, like so, like so. All right, so more or less it's a ball. That's pretty good. Now I'm going to take it and drop it into this part of my palms, and by doing this and rolling, I'm drawing out the point at the bottom. See, so I've got a teardrop now. Now let's flatten it by just taking our palms squeezing them together like this. Okay, and I'm just turning it and squeezing and squeezing and squeezing. All right. Okay, now I'm going to take a needle tool, if I can find my needle tool. Good heavens, I'm so ill prepared. Apologies. Oh, this one will work. This is a doll needle. This is, I think it's a doll needle. I don't know where I got it. Okay, so now I'm going to form the two lobes of the heart. You know what? I prefer my heart sort of asymmetrical. Not, if I did straight down the middle, then I would have a heart with lobes that are pretty much the same on both sides. And I prefer to have one larger and one smaller. So I'm going to just take and pierce, and I'm not exactly in the middle. Okay, so I'm just going to make it deep like that. Ta-da! Very close to symmetrical, but not exactly. Now I'm going to take my thumbs and I'm going to soften this part on both sides, okay? Like so. Just like that. So that's what I have so far. Now let's form a ridge right along this, which will be, you know, so here's one face, one heart, here's another, and I'd like to have this nice little ridge along the edge. So I'm just going to pinch like so. It doesn't have to be totally sharp, but it's helpful because I'm going to be covering one face and then turning it over, covering another. So it's nice to have this delineation between the two faces. It makes it easier to trim. I'm going to draw the point out a bit, like so. Now, how puffy you make it is totally up to you. So you're going to look at the side. And of course, the thickest part, I believe, should be here, not at the lobe and not at the tip, but in the center part of the heart. I think you can see that. Okay. Now, when you're forming your heart, just bear in mind that you're going to put slices on, which will make the heart larger. So if you're concerned about the size, then, and you don't want something that's too large, then you probably want to bear in mind that you have to start with a smaller heart underneath. Make sense? Yeah, I think so. I think you got that. I haven't shaped a heart in a while. This is not a difficult process, as you can see. Now, I also, in addition to having something that's slightly lopsided, I like to pull the lobes out a bit so it's elongated and not very short and chubby like me. Okay, so I think this is a good start. Now I'm going to take my brass rod, and people have asked, why do you use this instead of this? Well, first of all, the smaller diameter is actually easier for me to control, and it's also easier for me to see what I'm doing. You see, I'm just taking and rolling it and pulling that edge, or actually sort of rolling and pushing the edge. Now I will do the other side. Rolling the rod along this part of the heart. Whereas this, I can't really see. I mean, I can see through it, but if anything, that makes it more visually confusing than this. All right. So I'm going to continue working my way around, and then I'll be back, because I don't think you need to see that, okay? Back again, and I have rolled around the whole perimeter and raised a bit of a ridge. Now, when I'm doing this, if you're just starting with clay, it's really easy to grip things too hard, like to hold it so hard that you distort the form underneath. I'm really just letting this clay rest on my fingertips and then rolling. And I move it quite a bit so that no particular area gets so hot that it gets gooey. Because even though my clay is stiffer, if you hold it for a long time and your hands are very warm, of course, it's going to get squishy. It's going to get soft and squishy. And that, generally speaking, makes it more difficult to work with clay. So handle your clay sort of carefully, gingerly, and I think you will have a much better experience with it. All right, so I raised the ridge, and I think you can see just the highlight, how I raised it just by rolling on both sides, really primarily with just this tool. And so now I'm going to take my blade and I'm going to roll it right along that edge to mark the division between the two halves. See, so you can see that there's a slight, not very deep, cut along both sides. All right. And then you're going to roll it across the top like so. And then you will roll it across the other lobe. And now we have a division between the left and the right halves of the heart. Okay, so let's just set that down because we work one side at a time. Now I'm going to use this cane. It's slightly larger, and you can see I reduced it. But this is still a little too small, so I can reduce it to this size. But I think I am simply going to cut the small part off because I want these slices to be the same size. So I'll just cut it off. This is not going to go to waste. I'll just use it for something else. Okay, so let's begin. Now, how thick should this be? Well, this is too thin. In my opinion, this is kind of too thin. And the reason why is because I may want to sand it later. And if I make the slice this thin, and look, I even cut part of it away, I won't be able to sand it. I'll sand right through to the bottom, to the base. So what I would say is you want a slice that is also not too thick. I would say this is probably a good thickness, and I think this is probably about 1 millimeter, right? So let me just I'm going to cut a few so that I don't have to keep stopping. Now, what is important is that you try very hard to cut the slices the same thickness. Also, remember, this is not a race. You don't have to cut really, really fast. You can just take your time, cut straight through. Like so. Not erase. When I first started working with clay, I think I did think it was erase. I used to cut very fast. And cutting fast was just meant that it wasn't as accurate as it could be. All right, so now I'm just, you can see that even though this cane, the clay is firm, the blade, the act of cutting has sort of flattened it a bit. It's not as square. Well, don't use the flattened one. Take your fingers and gently pull to make the cane slices square again. So I hope that's clear. Now, as you are shaping these, you'll probably notice that some might be a bit thinner. This one I can feel is just a tad thinner. So I think what I'm going to do is set that one aside. And that might be one that I use along the edge, and you'll see. I'm going to need more slices than this, but let's begin. Okay, so the first thing I do actually is I work at this point, right between the lobes. And I position one slice between the lobes, and then I gently push it down, all right, right there. Now I will take the next slice, and I want, so, oops. I want them to be joined so that it's a mirror image. So there's the small, remember the small wing and the large wing? So this characteristic of the cane is what I'm going to watch as I position. Now I'm just draping it over and following that cut line, I'm going to remove just that little bit of cane. So there's the cut line, and I've removed it. Now let's scoot over to the other side and make sure that I get the same. Now I'm going to look at this. Actually, this is the correct way. So just pay attention to your pattern. And now let's put this final one in. And here is the situation. I am going to match up these two sides. And you see how this is flipping up? Well, it's flipping up like that because there isn't as much room. In other words, if this plane at that point was totally flat, then it would lay down. But in this case, I'm going to have to ease that tip down to the clay, like so. Okay? All right, so let's work on the top lobe. Once again, trying to match things up perfectly. Now, here is a situation where I know this is not a right angle anymore, is it? So the next slice I put in, I will have to ease in. But I can also make my life a little bit easier if I, at the same time, open this just a bit. That's Louie. He wants something from me. All right. Now let's just cut and trim away the excess again, like so. Okay. So there we have that, just like that. Oh, shoot. Shoot, shoot, shoot. Okay. I have to cut now because I have to stop my dog from barking. I'll be back. Okay, well, I'm back. He may start barking again. It's Monday. It's garbage day. And he figures it's his job to tell me when the garbage man is here. He's back. Okay, so now remember what I was saying. This is pretty close to 90 degrees, but I think it will help if I just take the side of my blade and push that over and make it more close. Okay, now I'm going to take this, which was actually the piece I cut from above, and I am going to use it to fill in that little space. Like so. Once again, take the blade and cut the excess away. Like so. Okay, now I'm going to do this other lobe later. I will instead move to the bottom just to show you what happens here. Remember to make them match up. Like so. Following the edge, cut it away. Now here again, I'm going to try to enlarge it. Now sometimes you can actually enlarge it by gripping and pulling it open. This I have done with larger pieces, but in this case I think we'll be fine this way. That's such a tiny little space I have to fill. Okay, so here we go. Put it there. Actually, I want to use it this way. I think this is the better match. Push it in like so. Once again, follow here. Okay, now I have to get this tip, but really, in order to do that, I think I'm going to take my blade and straighten out this edge best I can. Okay, now I'm going to take this slice, match it up, and this is the one that's slightly thinner. And what I'm doing here, see this gap here? Well, I actually am making the corners line up. So this little corner and this little corner are lining up. What I will do now is try to ease this clay into place. And you know, if I'm successful, yay, whoopee-doo for me. If not, I would take it off and cut a new slice, but I did manage to do it. Okay, so let's cut. And although it is slightly thinner, I don't think it's going to be a problem. Now, if it was a lot thinner, then of course I wouldn't use the slice at all. Okay, so I'm just straightening out that edge and that edge. Let's see if I can use this little piece to fill in. I'm hoping. I have hope. Okay, so this is actually the correct way. Am I going to cheat it? I think I will. See, because this isn't really correct. This is a bigger wing and that's a smaller one. Okay, I might as well do it right. So let me just cut a few more slices. And square it off again. Square it off again. Okay, just square it off. And ease this in. Okay, so of course, I think you know this, but you should never overlap the slices. That would, definitely create problems for you. Okay, now let's get this tip. All right, let me see. And just remember that you can ease the slice in. In other words, in some circumstances, you may want to secure one side and then another, and then ease the whole slice into position. It's much easier if you're covering something that's totally flat. Then you don't have this easing issue. But the reason why I do it this way as opposed to doing a flat sheet and then easing the whole thing in, I really think my patterns turn out more precise. And I have a lot more control over exactly where these slices are going. If I need to ease something in, of course, we've talked about that, and I ease it in. And it's much more difficult if you're dealing with a whole sheet. So I would encourage you to try everything, and perhaps it works better for you. It doesn't work the same for all of us. We do work differently. All right, so let me cover this lobe, which was the same as this one, and then I'll be back. All right, so this is what I've done. You can see I have just covered half of the heart. Now I'm going to cover the other side, and then I'll be back. The other side is exactly the same. Remember, we start here, right here with the first slice, and then we work our way out. Now, I probably will be back because I want to show you some of the trimming and how I try best to make the pattern match along this edge. Okay, but I will be back at that point. All right. So I have covered the whole heart, front, back, or front, back, really not different. And then along the edge, here's what has happened. Some places match up better than others, but I think that's kind of to be expected. But I'm not unhappy with the way they match up. All right, now it's time to smooth the slices. And here is where it becomes really important that your slices are pretty much the same thickness. This is much, much easier if they are. Just imagine if one of these slices was very, very thick and the other was thin. Well, when I roll over it, what would happen is the thicker slice would just go mushing over onto the thin one or push it out, and you would just get distorted pattern, which means all this work I did piecing this together would be wasted. So what I do frequently, if I feel that there's a big difference between one slice and another, and in this case, This one is lower. This slice is lower than this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my blade and just try to cut some of it away. You know, and it's not a huge amount, but I'm just trying at that point to make them the same thickness so that when I roll over, the pattern is not distorted because one is thicker than another. Okay, this feels pretty good. So I'm just going to go over the whole piece, and where necessary, I will trim some away very carefully, because if I trim too much away, then I've got the opposite problem, right? So if you're just new to this, to polymer clay, and you're a little bit afraid of doing the cutting, then I would say for your first time, just smooth it in. You will get used to these processes the more you work with clay. You'll get used to trimming away, and of course, the more you do it, the better you get at it, and the less fearful you are of making a mistake or ruining your work. Now, these all feel really good. This is a little bit difficult. This one feels a little bit thicker, and it's difficult to cut on a curve like this, but I will do my very best. And I have to tell you, I have done more than my share of ruining things, thinking I was going to make something better and ultimately creating more problems for myself. So in this case, I think I'm going to live with this little bit of difference between them because it's a difficult place to cut, and I really don't want to make a mistake and do the wrong thing. In a case like this too, you see I'm rolling back and forth, back and forth. So I'm trying to make these two slices move in the same way so that the thicker one does not overcome the thinner. Okay, so let me work on this and thin it out, and then I'll be back. I mean, not thin it out, join all the slices, and then I'll be back. All right, so I got the first slice on. Now I'm going to fill this space. So I'm going to line up this corner and, of course, the top, like so. And now, where does this line up along the edge? Well, it's right here. That's where the cut is on the other side, right there. So that's where I'm going to line this up. Now I'm going to ease this in just a bit, like so. And then carefully, I'm going to try to cut right along the same place. And I might have to cut twice because, of course, I can't really see too well where I'm cutting. Oops. So then I'm going to try to make the pattern meet. And you know, I think I have a bit of an overlap. So I've got a little too much clay there. So I'm going to cut some off and then take like my needle and try my best to remove that excess clay. And hope that I didn't push it so hard down that it's really stuck. That's another thing. When you're doing this kind of work, you don't want to secure the slices in position without knowing that they are correctly positioned, because if you do, then you're stuck. Ask me how I know. I know because I've been stuck. All right, so that's not a bad match at the seam, I don't think. Okay, so let me continue in the same way. Corner, corner, pull it down. Try to get this in the same place as it is on the other side. Sometimes it's not really possible. You see, this side of the heart must be larger than the other. But I'm going to do my best. Like so. Now I'm going to take oopsie, oopsie. And some of you might find this work kind of fussy, but to tell you the truth, I really like it. I don't know why, but I really like it. I like this kind of detail work. I like doing it. I do. I can't help it. And that's not too bad. Maybe it's not perfect, but it's really not too bad. But I feel a little lump. So sometimes you even just take your blade and you just trim some away. Okay, there we go. So that's how you deal with matching at the seams. This, you know, we're lucky. We work with a medium that can be repositioned and stretched and compressed. And you've seen some of that in action when I have to compress something to make it fit, or you have to stretch it out just a tad to make it fit in the other direction. But okay, so I will continue. I think you got that. That's not too bad. Okay. Well, I have rolled all the seams, and you know, every now and then when I do this, I also pinch like so, and that kind of warms the clay up, and that too makes it easier for those seams to get joined by rolling. I love this little heart. You know, we live in a world, there's a little philosophy. We live in a world where too often, you know, good enough is what we live with. This is good enough. This is good enough. I guess for me, the place where I can, from start to finish, control a process and make things as perfectly as I can is in my studio. And to the extent I can do that, I'm happy with my work. Now, what I will do is set this aside. I'm going to let it cool. And then I will come back and I will run my fingers across the surface and make sure that it's as smooth as I can make it. And if it isn't, then I'll roll a little bit more before I put it in my oven. Okay. I probably won't sand this. I'll only sand it if I need to. And if I need to, I'll be back. Okay. So the piece is cured, and I did sand it. And I really like it the way it is. It's nice and smooth. It feels great. Now let's talk about curing. In order for the best way to cure this large mass of clay and not get cracking in it is to cure it at a slightly lower temperature than we ordinarily recommend. I recommend elevated temperatures. That's for durability. At 310, 315, the clay is really, really, really strong. But a form like this, it doesn't really need to be cured that high. And curing at that elevated temperature increases the likelihood that you're going to get cracking. So I would say 290, 300, for 30 minutes from a cold oven. Nothing's going to happen to this. It's very sturdy. It's very strong. It's a solid mass of clay. So that's what I would recommend in terms of the temperature and the time. Now, what I also did with this was I took an acupuncture needle, and in places that you wouldn't see it, I pierced right into the mass. And what I was doing was providing opportunities for any air that might have been within the clay to escape, because air pockets in the clay are another problem. The air within expands, and when it expands, it will crack the clay. All right, so acupuncture needle, just selectively, places where you're not going to see it. I mean, I don't see any, and I really pierced a lot of holes in here. So that is it. I hope you've enjoyed today's tutorial, and that you will get into this piecing, and you may enjoy the process as much as I do. Thing is, when you come out at the other end and you have something that fits nicely along the edges, and you can be proud of that. All right, so until we meet again, I'm Donna Cato. Thanks for watching. Bye.